Coming up on Prime Time Lawmakers, the constitutional amendment allowing state charter schools has been tabled in the Senate. That chamber remains in session at this hour. A bill limiting abortions after 20 weeks has passed the House. Current law allows abortions through 26 weeks. A long-awaited measure to revise Georgia's Juvenile Justice Code clears the House. And it's the end of the legislative week. I'll be joined on set for some of the best political analysis on the air by Buddy Darden, a former state legislator and congressman, and Bill Crane, a political analyst with CSI Crane. For Wednesday, February 29, 2012, the 28th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly, this is Prime Time Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Let's go live to the state capitol. Sandra Parrish is there now and reports there was a late vote today on a bill to limit late-term abortions.
Scott, after more than 2 hours of debate, the House passed the bill 102 to 65, which reduces the time a woman can have an abortion from 26 weeks to 20 weeks based on the fetus, when a fetus can feel pain. The debate actually began before the bill even hit the House floor.
I've never been threatened, and I was threatened.
Representative Sharon Cooper says she and other Republicans were threatened by Georgia Right to Life President Dan Becker to support the bill.
I was sent down here to do the right thing, not to be threatened over a vote. I look at the bills. I try to do the very best thing I can do for my constituents and for the people of Georgia.
I am down here with the unenviable job of delivering the message to various Republicans that this is a political action year and that their actions have not lived up to their claim. And unfortunately, Representative Cooper is not the only one I've talked to, but she's the one that reacted.
Meantime, on the floor, sponsor Representative Doug McKillop explains why the bill is needed.
Georgia is second in the nation in late-term abortions. These are the barbaric procedures that are outlined in the booklet on your desks. I'm not going to go through them. The Supreme Court has identified them as gruesome, and I don't need to read them out for you. You can read them for yourselves. I feel it is the right thing to do to prohibit late-term abortions and to prevent pain-capable children from having to experience the pain of a late-term abortion.
But opponents complain 20 weeks is too early to know if a pregnancy is unviable. Representative Margaret Kaiser spoke of one family who learned after that time.
They had planned as a nursery. They were going to decorate it with a jungle theme and buy their son dinosaur pajamas. Anna said there are no words to describe the heartbreak that occurs when you switch from planning for your baby's future to the reality that he cannot live.
Representative Stacey Evans, who delivered her baby today, spoke in a pre-recorded video.
Very fortunately, my husband and I didn't have anything come back abnormal. We didn't have to make a difficult decision about what to do if we were faced with knowing that our child might not make it very long outside of the womb or would have a very challenging life with complications that I don't even want to imagine right now. We didn't have to make those choices, but so many women do. And that is their choice. That is their choice with their husband and their God and their doctor.
Dan Becker, again with Georgia Right to Life, tells me with 6 other states having such laws and a 7th where a court challenge was tossed out because of a lack of legal standing, he feels confident this bill will hold up as well. He calls it a major challenge to Roe versus Wade and the ongoing abortion debate. The House gave unanimous passage today to a bill overhauling the juvenile justice system. Representative Wendell Willard calls it the most important piece of legislation lawmakers will pass this year.
It is taking policies that have been recognized in other areas as serving good to the improvement of children who are in trouble. And I say by trouble, not only delinquency, but children with deprivation, children who are abused. These are children that come before our juvenile courts and are in need of the court's oversight and attention. The bill is a comprehensive rewrite of the entire juvenile code. It doesn't mean everything's replaced. What we have done, though, is taken the code that we have and put it into a more succinct, understandable document that can be followed by practitioners in the area of juvenile law and by the courts.
The bill addresses when the state may interfere with a parent's right regarding a child, strengthens protections for parents while also making rights of children clearer, and addresses how the courts deal with juveniles charged with a crime. The bill passed 172-0 and now goes to the Senate. Final passage today for a bill that will all but dismantle the Georgia Aviation Authority. The authority was created just a few years ago under former Governor Sonny Perdue.
Senate Bill 339 is part of the process that we're doing with the Aviation Authority to return the aviation assets back to the Department of Natural Resources, the Forestry Commission, and a King Air 90 for aerial photography back to the Department of Transportation. 2 years ago, I did work with Governor Perdue in making sure that we started the airport authority, and I told you at that time that when that airport authority was signed into law, that if it did not work, give me 2 years, and if it did not work, that I'd be the first one to come and say, let's undo it. And basically, I want to share with you today that I don't think we really properly implemented the program that was in place. This can be a true savings to the state of Georgia.
I believe it's true that South Carolina moved to this privatization model for the non-safety related aircraft, found that was more expensive. The bidding process for a privatization model is a little bit unusual in this matter, and I will be voting against this bill.
Aircraft that were controlled by the Aviation Authority would be returned to the Department of Natural Resources and the State Forestry Commission. The bill now heads to the governor. Scott?
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Long day at the Gold Dome. Newt Gingrich paid a visit to the state capitol today as part of his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination. He's been traveling all around Georgia for next week's Super Tuesday primary. After speaking in the House, he was joined by Governor Nathan Deal for a press opportunity.
We were there as he launched the Republican Revolution of 1994, which brought control of the United States House of Representatives into Republican hands for the first time in 40 years. We were there as he took his leadership position seriously, of making sure that the House of Representatives in the first 100 days voted on all of the agenda items of the contract with America. We were there when he also was able, under his leadership, to balance the federal budget for the first time in 40 years and to keep it balanced for a period of 4 years. This is the kind of leadership that the United States needs today in the White House.
I'm running because I really do believe in the biblical phrase that without vision the people perish. I really do believe that we need a presidential candidate and then a president who has a vision of a successful, safe, free American future. And I really believe that with the help of my many friends here, that we're going to win the Georgia primary and win it decisively. As a matter of our national defense, we need an American energy policy that will make us independent of the Middle East so that no American president will ever again bow to a Saudi king.
Gingrich stopped short of saying a loss in Georgia would force him from the race. Let's go back live to the state capitol right now, where the Senate has been in session late this evening, and Keosha Howard joins us once again. Any progress at all on the charter schools constitutional amendment?
Well, Scott, actually, after much debate in the Senate today, they decided to table the constitutional amendment that would allow the state to charter schools. Senator Ronnie Chance presented the bill.
Changes were made on the House side to address several of these issues. The local funding issue is not an issue because there is no local funding. This is strictly state funds used for state charter schools. This bill does not allow the state to do anything with local property and sales tax revenue currently used to fund schools. That funding would remain 100% intact. 100% intact. What we're trying to do here with this state charter school is just put another tool in the toolbox to allow parents, to allow community leaders, to allow legal guardians, if you will, the choice, the opportunity to do something else if they feel like that's what they need to do.
And Scott, of course, the biggest concerns over the charter schools amendment are the funding and local control. There is enabling legislation that is set to take care of both of those issues, so we'll see what happens with that later tonight.
Okay, many thanks, Keosha. Thanks a lot. In fact, as we get toward the end of this legislative week, it is a 3-day week. It has been busy. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of the week in review.
This week under the Gold Dome, on Monday, the 26th legislative day, a bill to keep sex offenders from driving school buses and other commercial vehicles passed the House. Bill sponsor Representative Paul Battles explains the measure.
If there is someone that has been convicted of a sexual crime, they can apply for and they can receive a CDL license and be able to drive these buses. Until today.
The bill passed 157-4 and goes to the Senate. The House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee passed a bill with greater limits on late-term abortions.
We have got to do something to put a stop to the barbaric practice of late-term abortions. We're still talking about 140 days of choice, but at the point at which a fetus can experience pain and is just a baby.
It requires a woman to carry to term a medically futile pregnancy, even if every doctor tells her that this baby will not come to full term and will not survive delivery.
That measure moved to House rules. Also on Monday, a bill expanding reporting requirements for witnesses of child abuse passes the Senate Judiciary Committee. Currently, there are 9 professions that are required to report child abuse, including social workers, school officials, and healthcare providers. Under this measure, all adults would have to report known cases of abuse or eyewitness accounts. Concerns were expressed that citizens might not be able to discern between abuse and acceptable disciplinary action. Senator Renee Unterman says she thinks the bill clarifies what constitutes child abuse.
We made the language more restrictive, saying cruel or excessive physical or mental pain to a child. It's not the child in Walmart who's getting a whipping.
The bill passed unanimously and moved to Senate rules. On Tuesday, Governor Nathan Deal kicked off the Complete College Georgia initiative, the goal to reduce the need for remedial classes and help more Georgians achieve a college education. Presidents from all 35 of Georgia's colleges gathered at the governor's mansion.
One of the most important things that sets Georgia apart as a destination for growth of business is the fact that we have a talented workforce. Our post-secondary institutions serve as the pipeline for that workforce.
The project will be funded in part by a $1 million grant from the Complete College America Alliance and the Lumina Foundation. The bill that would make assisting a suicide a felony passes out of the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee. It would also revoke the license of any medical personnel that assist in a suicide. Bill sponsor Representative Ed Setzler explains the need for such legislation.
Given the narrowing language that there could be legitimate, again, taking someone off of kidney dialysis, if it was required to be demonstrated to relieve pain or discomfort, then that wouldn't really apply.
That legislation passed out of committee and moved to House rules. Also on Tuesday, the Senate Transportation Committee heard testimony on bipartisan legislation that would place a moratorium on further high occupancy toll or hot lanes.
If we're going to do something, it needs to be something that is working and that provides either better air quality or better movement of overall traffic.
And I call it an alphabet soup that's responsible. We have Greta, we have MARTA, we have CERTA, we have the DOT, the Georgia State DOT, and we have the Gwinnett County DOT. And for us to have all of these agencies and to have no accountability and not to have the General Assembly to have input into it, to me it's an insult.
Of course, October was difficult as we expected it to be, and November, December, January, and February we've seen a steady recovery both in speeds and in volumes in those lanes.
No vote was taken on the measure. If passed, the bill will not affect the proposed 75 project. The House reacts to the Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal, adopting legislation that would take away incentive pay for teachers who falsify standardized tests.
This just affects the bonus that they received for any standardized test achievement which they later admit to or is found guilty of falsifying.
That legislation moves on to the Senate. And protesters opposing a measure that could affect undocumented college students in Georgia gathered at the Capitol on Tuesday. The Board of Regents has implemented a policy regarding the approximately 300 undocumented students in Georgia's university system, restricting the schools they can attend and imposing out-of-state tuition. But a measure currently before the House would make higher education a public benefit and one that illegal immigrants would not be eligible to receive.
HB 59 and SB 458 are worse than any other anti-immigrant bill that has come before us for one reason. It is the only policy that seeks to punish infants and toddlers for their actions of their parents.
That measure is currently in Senate rules, and that's a look back at what happened this week under the Gold Dome.
I'm going to go back live to the state capitol where Keosha Howard is standing by. And I was curious, Keosha, has the legislature responded yet to a plea from sheriffs and wardens for some help in a technological area?
Well, earlier today, Scott, the Senate approved a resolution to urge Congress to permit the use of cell phone jammers for prevention of illegal cell phone use in prisons, jails, and youth detention facilities. The legislation sponsor, Senator Johnny Grant, explains the bill.
In 2011 alone, the Georgia Department of Corrections confiscated more than 8,500 illegal cell phones, arrested more than 300 visitors and 60 staff employees. The use of jamming technology would enable us to better control even this illegal contraband when it comes in. It would not be able to be used for illicit purposes.
That measure passed, and as it is an urging resolution, it does not have to go to the Senate. Go to the House. And Scott, the Senate is still in session at this time.
Okay, and the sheriffs and wardens keep telling me over and over again, if they could get one thing, it'd be permission to put those cell phone jammers up to short circuit all the nefarious planning that's going on behind bars. Listen, while we got you there, I'm curious about the state charter school amendment debate this evening. Now, they tabled it. Is that so more senators could speak or so they could get more votes before they take a vote? What are you hearing?
I believe it's probably because they didn't have the votes. Plenty of senators spoke about it and wanted to speak about it. So I think they're just trying to wrangle some more people to actually say yes to it.
All right. Will it come up again? Will it come up again on Monday? Do we know yet?
It could come up again tonight, but I believe more likely to come up next week.
Thanks very much, Keosha. Thanks for that live update. We've got to take a short break, and Prime Time Lawmakers don't go anywhere. As you see, there's plenty to talk about. Buddy Darden and Bill Crane will be joining me on set when we come back. It's the end of the legislative week. Now it's time for some analysis and a little fun. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, a great deal has happened under the Gold Dome this week. The state Senate is still in session. As you can see, they're talking right now, I think, about something to do with scrap metal in Georgia. I'm not quite sure if that's to short-circuit scrap metal thieves or perhaps help that industry a little bit. Bolster recycling, maybe, could be. That's Senator Loudermilk speaking right now. A great deal has happened under the Gold Dome this week. You've seen the highlights just a moment ago. As we continue with our end-of-the-week festivities, for valuable insight, we welcome in our good friend Buddy Darden. Buddy's a former state legislator and U.S. Congressman. He's senior counsel to McKenna, Long, and Aldridge. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to Prime Time Lawmakers Bill Crane, political analyst with CSI Crane. Well, any surprise today that the state Senate couldn't get together on the charter school bill amendment?
They didn't have the vote.
Yeah, it's two-thirds, and they don't have them. And probably
that's right. It takes 38, and not two-thirds present and voting, remember, 38 bodies to hold up a hand and say yes. And the Democrats seem to be hunkering down pretty well, and unless they peel off at least 2 Democrats, the Republicans aren't willing to step up and walk the plank for no reason at all.
Now, what would it take for that to happen? What would they'd have to get something for that, wouldn't
they? Either more enabling legislation that really speaks to setting a number figure on that QBE dollar that follows the scholar. They're not talking about local money anymore, but it's still the state allotment of QBE dollars going through the local Board of Education and overriding the local Board of Education. They may have to put a cap on that. They're talking about the lowest range of 3% of QBE recipients, but that's still a little bit of wiggle room per dollar or per scholar. So
and those very senior senators over there, Democrats, are pretty good at cutting deals too.
And all from rural Georgia.
All from rural Georgia, with the exception of course, you've got Steve Thompson and
DeKalb
and Cobb.
Yeah, sorry.
And also, of course, is Codeine George Hooks. Those guys are probably driving the train right now.
It's been interesting, though, seeing the crossing back and forth between urban interest and rural interest, even on this issue, isn't it?
Well, the majority of charter schools are in metro counties. And
yeah, right.
The City of Atlanta has the most. DeKalb schools has second.
But some of those rural schools are interested in getting online schooling and that sort of thing.
And
in
they
charter
want the
schooling.
choices, but they're already concerned about the state preempting and taking dollars away from them, even if it's only their QBE money.
That's the whole issue, is taking away dollars from from the local school
Who do you
systems. That's what
trust?
it's all about.
Could they? You've been down there, Buddy. You've been in that chamber. What do you think? Could they vote on that tonight?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Not on a late night like this.
Okay.
And I think you've probably seen some of the senators have already gone back to the districts as well. So I think it's highly unlikely they'll vote tonight.
All right. The State House voted to limit abortions to 20 weeks, 20 weeks into a pregnancy after a very impassioned debate.
Buddy and I were talking about this one prior to getting on set with you tonight, and it seems that no matter how, general election or state election, that the NRA and Georgia Right to Life will keep pushing that ball to the right to the point that Republicans cannot get elected in Georgia. And I really think having a child that has Down syndrome and having to face some of those choices, we kept our child, you don't know what that's like until you're there.
That's correct. And the problem is these groups keep on pushing the envelope, and they've done pretty well. They've been very successful, but every now and then you've got to know when to take yes for an answer and to say we've accomplished our purpose. And of course Sharon Cooper, I saw the footage that she's very upset. She's married to a physician. I think she's a registered nurse as well. She's highly upset because it seems like the effect of this bill that the House has passed today seems to be getting in substituting the legislator's medical opinions for those of physicians.
Now, what is
That's
fetal,
very dangerous.
what is fetal pain, and how are you able to tell that a fetus is in pain?
Exactly.
They can't talk. I mean, movement is spontaneous.
They're buying themselves a pretty big lawsuit. At the same time, over on the Senate, they're doing the same thing. They have decided to give away free stickers to put on your tag saying, "In God we trust."
Instead of charging $1.
Instead of charging $1. And the Bible tells us to render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God. And I think that they also are buying another lawsuit on these social issues here. I think it's very dangerous area for them to be getting into.
Now, does it go any further than the House, the abortion bill? What do you think?
I think it'll come up on the other side, but I don't think it ultimately will pass. I believe the leadership has the intelligence to understand to pull this back, but it's certainly, in an election year, I don't think it's the kind of discussion that's helpful to the party.
There'll be a whole lot of discussion about it. But I think in the end, cooler heads will prevail, and I don't think the Senate will study it. I think this is the kind of bill that probably needs to be studied a lot.
Much like in the state of Virginia, the governor there has stepped back and pulled back in on these more recent tests. An invasive vaginal insertion required and an internal ultrasound that the governor, after realizing the particulars of legislation that had already been passed, said he won't sign it. And I think
Governor Deal does not want this type of confrontation to occur where it comes to his desk and he either signs it or sends it away. So I think the governor will weigh in behind the scenes.
Meanwhile, moving forward on other issues, juvenile justice reform. You know, this is huge. They've been working on this for 5 years behind the scenes, Bill, and it looks like that this is going to happen if they reconcile some differences with the Senate.
You certainly don't see those kind of votes very often, 170 to 2. But there is and we chatted about this, that there's a difference that juveniles are wards of the state. They are not prisoners. So there's a lot more in how you treat them and all the requirements from a budgetary standpoint, while they're hopefully not going to go on to prison later.
I agree with Chairman Willard when he said this is probably the most important thing they've done so far this year, because it's comprehensive reform of the code, coupled with what they're attempting to do on the criminal justice side,
the adults,
that you
right.
talked to Chief Justice Hunstein about last night. I think that might be the real significant contribution of this session.
But that winds up, obviously, it's been stopped for right now. The criminal justice reform has been stopped. There's concerns of what's going on inside that bill. Is the sentencing guidelines are out of whack? It doesn't save enough money?
There's concern about the drug sentencing. There's 800 pages. It's an omnibus bill. It takes on parole over here and probation over here. It recreates the different sentencing for the cat burglar. If you're in a home at night, then you're doing a burglary in the daytime.
Raises felony thresholds.
It does some things that particularly the law enforcement community, sheriffs and chiefs of police have raised concern about. So they're going to spend the day on that tomorrow, debating and kicking it around, and I think it ultimately will pass, but I think we'll see some more changes.
As a former DA, I can tell you the only way this is going to work is to give the sentencing judges extremely broad authority and let them be judges and not sycophants. So the only way they can ever accomplish the purpose here is to let the judges enforce the law according to the circumstances and use their judgment and use their discretion rather than following some legislative mandate.
So would that really solve a lot of the problems here between with the governor's dissatisfaction and other areas dissatisfied with this, Buddy, if you give the judges a little more leeway?
I believe that's a big part of it. Plus, you've got to create the personnel to supervise these people who are not going to be in prison. You just can't.
Yeah, and fund the diversion program.
Exactly. Those are very, very expensive programs.
But they're less expensive than a hard bet. I mean, it's a lot less expensive to put someone in alternative sentencing.
There'll be upfront costs, though. Right. Millions of dollars in upfront costs, so they got to cover
somebody
that.
Told me you could send a person to Harvard for less than you could send them to prison. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but it illustrates the point.
It really comes home. $54 a day to lock up an adult, over $200 a day to incarcerate a juvenile. So at least they're talking about it. They're making some progress.
That's correct. And if you're going to keep people, confine people, you're responsible for them.
Other issues, including personal growth legislation passing committee. What that means is you have to be doing something for your own personal benefit, taking GED courses, adult literacy courses, and to get food stamp benefits, that sort of thing. That actually made it out of a committee. Is that going anywhere?
Well, even in a day where we've got very confined budget resources, we still find time for the I'm okay, you're okay bills. And I never cease. I mean, Buddy served in the body, so I will be kinder than usual. But the stuff that gets taken up both in the mornings with the House resolutions, the Senate resolutions, stuff like that.
I never fail to be amazed at the things that they can think up to pass. But as the chairman of the Rules Committee, John Meadows, has said, we're going to hold a lot of that for further study in the Rules Committee.
Further study. All right, time is marching on. Today's day 28. 29 is Monday. Next Wednesday's crossover day. Buddy, what do you think?
We're running out of time in a hurry.
Yeah.
And crossover day, of course, is the day that separates the wheat from the chaff, and there are a lot of things to be done. I want to see where the budget's going, and that's what it's all about. All of this other stuff is just a sideshow that until the budget is ready and the budget is passed. And this gives us something to occupy the time, but the real game is the budget.
The budget, and I do think the charter schools bill being the bigger piece of debated legislation, and the two criminal justice reform packages that you discussed, which the criminal justice reform, the bigger one, doesn't have the votes yet. The other, juvenile justice, is already pretty much locked up.
Presidential politics. I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about this yet. Newt Gingrich making a lot of appearances around Georgia. Rick Santorum actually wound up splitting the delegates with Mitt Romney in Michigan last night. So it was a Romney win, but not the delegate count. Does anyone have a chance of knocking Newt off the perch in Georgia?
I think he takes Georgia. I think the question is what he does after Georgia, because if you looked at the other states he was in last night, 7%, 11%. It will be hard to see coming out of Super Tuesday if he doesn't pick up 2 to 3 states where he goes next.
Okay, last few words.
And we Democrats are just sitting back enjoying the whole thing.
Okay. It's great to see both of you. Hang in there. Prime Time Lawmakers is back on Monday, March 5th, with the General Assembly convenes for Legislative Day 29. It's been almost 2 months since Governor Nathan Deal laid out his competitiveness initiative during the State of the State. It's a group of tax reforms that aim to make Georgia more business friendly, and that's still on the bubble. On Monday's show, we'll welcome Commissioner Chris Kaminsky of the Department of Economic Development and Alan Essig of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute to talk about repealing the energy sales tax, reforming the job tax credit, and removing the sales and use tax in certain projects. An exclusive interview Monday on Prime Time Lawmakers. Next Wednesday, the General Assembly meets for the all-important crossover day on day 30, and many issues remain unresolved. We'll have complete coverage, plus all the latest news from under the Gold Dome. And Lawmakers returns on Monday. You can see a repeat of this broadcast tomorrow morning at 5:30. Coming up next, Georgia Traveler, the best of Season 5, David Zelski and the whole Traveler gang visit the Booth Western Art Museum in Cartersville, find first-class Southern cuisine in Atlanta, tour Gibbs Gardens and Ball Ground, and much more. That's the best of Georgia Traveler coming up next in GPB. That's our broadcast. Have a great night.
That are in the scrap metal business, and they're very good at it. They are running an honest business, and they, for the most part, want to do the right thing.
This is a GPB original production.